you're familiar with my other two works, either the They Live John Carpenter special or my Philip K. Dick presentation, then you know that I have talked about how those works seem to reflect a deep truth that we aren't even aware that we are aware of. It's a deep known truth, but it comes out in our creative works. Well, those are famous works. This is a little different. This is about a work that's so rare, it was hardly known by anyone. But what the work brought into reality, I think everyone can agree, there is very good proof that that work indeed was a deep truth. The radio transmission was shut down, the entire station. So, here's the story. You've probably heard before about the frantic caller of September 11th, 1997, who called the Coast to Coast show, also known as Art Bell Show, with the news that there were extra-dimensional beings that had control of our world and that they were going to cause disasters and wipe out most of the population. No matter what you've heard about it being a hoax or real, this presentation will have new information that you have not heard before. I think this is the best case for proof of the quantum infiltration, but also that we humans can tap into a consciousness that is a unified field that connects us all. That is God, essentially. But I don't want to spoil the surprise because it's pretty cool. And we tap into it, by the way, through our creativity. And these deep truths that are long forgotten ancient knowledge of humans, they are coming to light now because of our creativity. So all we have to do is be creative and love each other, of course. But let me get to the story. On September 11th, 1997, Mr. Art Bell was hosting his show Coast to Coast, and he was taking calls from Area 51 people who had worked there, and a man called who was very convincing. This is the recording of that call.
Area 51.
Yeah, that's right. Were you an employee or are you now?
A former employee.
Former employee.
I was let go on a medical discharge about a week ago. I've kind of been running across the country. Oh, man, I don't know where to start. They'll triangulate on this position really, really soon.
So you can't spend a lot of time on the phone. So give us something quick.
Okay. What we're thinking of as aliens are, they're extra-dimensional beings that an earlier precursor of the space program made contact with. They are not what they claim to be. They have infiltrated a lot of aspects of the military establishment. The disasters that are coming, the government knows about them. There's a lot of safe areas in this world that they could begin moving the population to now, Art.
But they're not doing anything.
They are not. They want the major population centers wiped out so that the few that are left will be more easily controllable. I started getting...
The transmission for the entire radio station was lost at that moment, and it didn't come back on for a good 30-45 minutes. When it finally did come back online, as expected, Art Bell and all of his now millions of listeners were freaking out.
Well, this was certainly interesting. We are now on a backup system, everybody. That one caller that I had on the air, I guess we were about in the middle of his transmission, his telephone call, which was one of the strangest ones I've ever had. And the entire transmitting system by satellite went down here, and we were notified we were off the air. And it would appear to be from this end and some sort of massive transmit failure. So we are now using a backup system to be on the air. And not that I would normally believe this kind of thing, mind you, but I can't help but wonder if somebody zapped us in some way right in the middle of a very, very strange, one of the strangest calls I've ever had. We apparently lost all transmit capability on this end here in Nevada. The transmitter went belly up suddenly for some unknown reason. I've never seen it do this in all the years that we've been on the air. I have never seen the transmitter in this way just simply fail, massively fail, like a massive heart attack of some kind. At the end of the call, it got worse and worse. He was crying, and he screamed. He screamed, and the line went dead.
Art soon learns that the satellite was knocked off of its orbit with Earth.
I'm going to take you now up to Oregon, Medford, Oregon, where our engineer, network engineer, Tony Howell, is on the line. Tony, are you there?
Yes, Ed, I'm here.
Okay. Tony, you just got off the telephone with General Electric in New Jersey, I guess, correct?
Correct, GE Americom.
GE Americom in New Jersey. When I went off the air, what happened?
Well, the story goes that the satellite that you transmit on, GE1, seems to have lost its Earth sensor lock.
Its Earth sensor lock.
Correct, meaning that it lost its orientation in the sky just slightly and started a kind of a shift. So many of the frequencies, KU and C, actually started to phase out, and that's what happened to your frequency.
So in other words, it would not just have been me. It would have been everybody on the satellite I'm using, which would have been quite a considerable number of broadcast facilities, wouldn't it?
Well, even wilder than that, it was 50 channels.
50 channels?
50 channels on GE1, not including our channel, which is the network's KU channel, which, as everybody knows, we stayed on the air just fine. You're the one that went down.
Yeah, I went down. That's right. Well, then how could you... No, wait a minute. Well, you use the same GE1 to get it back to New Jersey, right?
Exactly. That's just amazing.
If it lost Earth lock, it should have lost, which means the satellite lost orientation momentarily.
Right.
Then it should have lost it for everything.
Strangely enough, many channels did stay on the air, including our channel, except your channel.
Too weird, Tony.
Really weird.
And if that's not weird, as you know, I monitored my transmitter here, and I watched all the sync locks, and they were gone, like this transmitter was gone.
Yeah, you just weren't touching anything in the sky. I mean, you were totally missing your
satellite
bird, yeah. It took them about a half an hour to get it back together. They had everybody scrambling around GE.
Well, I sure would like to understand how you can lose 50 channels out of a total of how many, do you think?
At least 200 up there, at least.
So then a quarter of the channels were lost because it lost its look at Earth.
For some reason, it was supposed to be looking and getting its power solarly from the sun and looking at it in a specific spot and not finding it there. It could have lost its sync.
Oh, so maybe just one of the panels supplying, say, a quarter of the spacecraft lost it.
Yeah. Of course, GE, it's still early in the game. GE's not quite certain, but that's how it's looking.
The link to Earth didn't know where Earth was anymore, or at least a portion of it, and took about a quarter of the totality of the channels, 250, off the air. Now, is that weird or what? Weird stuff. In all my life, I went in the other room, and I looked at the uplink transmitter, and it was like it was dead as a doornail. I mean, everything was, there was no sync light, there was no anything. Every indicator on the transmitter said it was dead as a doornail, and in fact, it was not dead. The satellite in space that it was looking at was dead, or only, to be more specific, one portion of that satellite in space was dead. I don't know. This is one for the record books.
So basically, then a week later, some sources say, or the next year, several months later, the guy calls back, the frantic caller. And this is what happened then.
East of the Rockies, you're on the air.
Hi, Art. I'm Brian. I hung up on you last week.
Oh, I see.
And I just figured, damn the torpedoes, I'll just do this and let the chips fall where they will. Everybody, I am the Area 51 caller. That's my statement, and let you or whatever tear it apart.
You claim you're the Area 51 caller?
I am the man.
How do you account for the fact, Area 51 caller,
Okay.
that part of the way through your spiel, the satellite went down?
I have no idea, and it scared the heebie-jeebies out of me that night. I've called a number of times on your specialty line nights doing different, kind of wacky characters, and that's all that one was supposed to be. If the call had been completed, it would have been ancient history by now.
Has it occurred to you that perhaps, if you're really what you say you are, you created the reality of the rest of the situation and took down my satellite?
That scares the heebie-jeebies out of me because it means that what I was saying was somehow correct, and it was fabrication, kind of
creating a reality.
Yeah, if that was the case, I humbly apologize to you because I love your show, and the last thing I would ever want to do is
knock
tear
me
you
off the air.
What can I do to prove my claim here?
Well, I guess you could give us a little of what you gave us then so that we could hear it and know it to be you.
Are you sure you want me to do that, Art?
I'm positive.
Don't, Art, please. I don't want you to ask me to do this. If I start doing that guy,
You're right about that. Now, let's just take that little sample that you just gave us so that we don't alter some sort of horrid little reality here at the end of the program, and we'll let the callers be the judge.
Okay.
All right?
I thank you for this opportunity. This has just been driving me bananas for months, and I knew it was very difficult for me to prove to you, but I just thank you for your patience.
It's quite all right. Thank you. Fritz in Phoenix, as a matter of fact, called and said, oh, yes, that's him. Somebody else said, oh, no. He has done his little Area 51 caller IMO, or the real thing, depending on what you think. So we'll leave it up to all of you. That is what you think.
But we don't have to wait for that. Let's just get right down to the truth, shall we? So the Area 51 caller's real name is Bryan J.L. Glass. And he never intended for the call to become such a well-known hoax of sorts. But he was being facetious. He was acting. He was being theatrical. He was inspired by a character he had created for the stage that was kind of a crazy person, but he went ahead and used the backstory of the project that he was working on, which was a comic book called Ship of Fools. He was working on it around that time, and the premise basically is, it says here, we lost, they won. In the wake of an apocalyptic alien invasion, the world's greatest superheroes and deadliest supervillains must form an alliance to prevent their own extermination. The enemy of your enemy is your friend. But will they be able to ultimately put aside their bitter past to prevent global genocide? So I'm going to let Brian tell you in his own words the rest of what he did to be theatrical and to be the best caller, hands down, ever on the Art Bell Show, a.k.a. Coast to Coast.
Well, now, hi, you're live on Fade to Black with Jimmy Church. Hey, Brian.
Yes.
Say hi to the world.
Hello, world.
This is Brian Glass, everybody. The gentleman that made the call 17 years ago on Art Bell, which was radio history. Welcome to the program, Brian. How are you tonight?
I'm doing fantastic. This is so great to be on your show. And do you know we are 2 days away from the actual anniversary of the call?
Is that bizarre? It's called synchronicity, my brother.
Yeah.
Synchronicity. You know, we were talking over the last couple of days, Brian and I went and looked on YouTube, and his clip with Art it's millions of views. And see, this is the thing, is not only is there millions of views on YouTube with that, but that was when Art was at his massive steamrolling peak. And there was probably 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 million people that night that heard it live. Did you have any idea, Brian? Did you have any clue you would leave a mark on literally tens of millions of people for a couple of decades?
It has been a surreal 17 years. I was a struggling up-and-coming comic book writer at the time. I was also part of a touring theater group out of Philadelphia. And I was a huge fan of Art Bell because I would spend my evenings literally in my parents' basement, the literal cliche. Back in 97, I was in my parents' basement, and I would listen to Art Bell, and I would be on the computer, and I would either be writing or lettering my upcoming comic. And I would listen to Art, and the very first inspiration for the call that became the Area 51 caller was a night that he had vampires calling up. And he at one point, he did it at one of his open lines, he did vampire line. And everyone calling up was supposed to say they were a vampire. And then at one point he had a caller call in to say he was a vampire hunter. And that was where the first inspiration to kind of do the crazy paranoid guy to call in and be a vampire who actually wanted to be killed. And I spent that whole evening, like within the couple of hours that the free lines were open, trying to get through, and I didn't. And it was like 2 weeks later, he did the Area 51 caller, and I was working on a book with Mike Oeming, at the comic creator Mike Oeming at the time, called Ship of Fools. And that whole spiel I rattle off is the backstory behind our comic Ship of Fools, about precursor to NASA, and they were extra-dimensional beings and disasters that were going to change the landscape of the world. And I just thought, I'm going to make the call. I'm going to play the same crazy paranoid character. Coincidentally, at the time, in this touring theater group, I was playing a guy in a mental institution in a show called Asylum. And I took the characterization, the language, stuttery pronunciation, and combined it all with the backstory of Ship of Fools and thought, let me make the call. And what no one on the air heard was I had boxes set up in the basement. I had a glass to shatter. And at the very end of the call, when basically things disconnected on Art, was all of a sudden I shrieked, they found me, and I started throwing boxes around, and it ended with a bottle smashing, seconds of dead air. And then I picked up the phone and went, what you have heard, Mr. Bell, was just entertainment for your audience. Click. And I realized I was no longer on the air. And when I tuned in the radio, all hell had broken loose.
Man, I'll never forget it. I remember I was so disturbed after that. And back then, you couldn't, jump on YouTube or listen to files or go back and review. You were stuck unless you were recording the show like with a cassette deck or something. You couldn't go and listen. And I was like, did that really happen? And the next day, everybody talking about it, and it was disturbing. It was absolutely disturbing. And I guess I've never spoken to Art about this directly. I would love for him to call in. Art, if you're going to call in on any night, tonight is the night that you call in. But that the satellite going down and the feed going down, that really happened.
Yeah, that is, I've been, over the years, I've been accused of various people who, like, of course, you make such a claim as this, you're the Area 51 caller, and immediately you get the people who don't believe it. You immediately feed into the air of conspiracy. But there's the people that then did believe that, that my end of it was theater, and then they've been angry, as if, like, I called Art out of the blue to seed this false information, but it was part of the theater of that night, the Area 51 line.
Right.
And when you listen to the calls that preceded mine, the quality of the, quote, performances varies from quasi-believable to that's a guy having fun on the phone. But the satellite going out in the middle of that call, that suddenly took it to a completely different level that I didn't set out to, let me fool art. Let me fool the ufology community. Let me trick people. It was part of the theater of Art Bell's show, and I was just a call that got in. And for me, the true, while people have said, oh, the moment the call is a fake, then, oh, it's all a fake, and I'm angry at him, and all the stuff that I've gotten. But for me, the true conspiracy reality is, while my call was fake, Art Bell's show was real.
Mm-hmm.
I said something in a fake call that made a real satellite lose Earthlock, whatever that means. And that is what has terrified me for 17 years.
Absolutely. I mean, the odds of that happening at that moment, and you could hear it in Art's voice to have the satellite feed go down. And I remember the guy calling up after that, and it was like Mark Furman was on the air, right? Or something, something bizarre came on, and it lasted for minutes. It didn't, it wasn't quick like we did tonight here, but it lasted for minutes. And then when Art came back and he was on his backup generator or backup feed line or whatever he was doing to get back on the air, he was perplexed, and you could tell he was flustered, and he doesn't fluster.
So this work that was an original piece that a writer took the idea and ran with it and made a character based off of a character he created for a show he was acting in. He took all these pieces of original creativity and he made them into a new work that crossed the lines of what's real and what's fake, because it got real. When someone heard that it was too close to the truth and that the masters, if you will, that are ruling over us, which are a quantum infiltrating group. I don't know where they're from, but I know they're infiltrators. And they've infiltrated us at the highest levels of government across time and space. Basically forever, because quantum time operates different than linear time. We are now living in quantum time. And this is one of the proofs of it. This wonderful piece of evidence. So, Mr. Brian Glass, if you are listening to this by chance, thank you, because what you did was tapping into the collective consciousness and giving us a clue. And if, for those of you out there who don't believe that it was any sort of powers that be that turned the satellite off, just part of the satellite, if you think that it was just a coincidence, I would suggest that you give some consideration to the only other possible theory, that perhaps God himself intervened that night on September 11th, 1997. And maybe it had something to do with the fact that God's son, Jesus Christ, was born on September 11th in the year 3 BC. But again, that's more speculation. I just read a lot. So thanks for watching, you guys, and leave me some comments. Let me know what you think. But remember what Philip K. Dick says. The author, him or herself, doesn't even know how much of his or her work is the truth. Sometimes we, quote unquote, accidentally stumble upon it, and it's more true than we can ever know. So, thanks for watching. Bye.